If you're planning to do podcast interviews on your podcast and you're wondering, how do you go about it? Do you need to do pre-interview chats before you book them in? Do you need to prepare them? Are you all on the same page? Well, there's lots of different ways to go about it, but I'm just going to run through a few options for you, and then you do you. So that's what I'm getting into today. Hello, I'm Olivia D'Souza. I'm a multi-passionate entrepreneur. I'm a content and podcast expert. I support visionary entrepreneurs and leaders passionate about living with purpose. Join me as we explore podcasting, life, business, and authenticity. Subscribe for meaningful conversations with a business buddy who gets what it's like. Welcome to Magnetic Pod. I'm stepping in the next level me. I'm here to be everything I can be. Okay, so if you are having podcast guests on your show, and obviously it's great to have podcast guests, there's lots you can get out of it. You just got to think about a number of things, which is your time, what your style of podcast is, what your goals are, and all of those sort of things. So, for example, if your vision is to be an in-depth podcast interviewer and have those deep and meaningful conversations like The Imperfects, for example, or Diary of a CEO, or No Filter with Mia Freedman, or Andrew Denton. I loved his show when it was on back in the day. Any of those type of shows, then absolutely you need to have some preparation beforehand. A lot of the times that will involve reading somebody's book. I know for myself, there's been interviews I've done where I've interviewed people that have gone through some incredible pivotal moment in their life, or some deep trauma, or something absolutely staggering that it would not have come out in the interview, and I would not have known how to broach or raise that or get anywhere near that topic if I hadn't done the preparation and I hadn't read their book first. When I interviewed Neil Donald Walsh, the author of Conversations with God, it was vital that I had read the book and knew what questions to ask. Although, to be honest, for the first half of it, he kind of interviewed himself. That's a whole other story. I probably should do a podcast episode about that experience. That was interesting, and I learned a lot from doing that. But yeah, if you want to have an in-depth podcast interview, you do need to do the preparation. But that doesn't mean that every podcaster has to do that. There are many podcasts that are successful, enjoyable, informative, educational, entertaining, all of those things without that. It's just a matter of, is that what you're going for? So for most of the interviews, if I've been on, have not required anything like that from me. And I know podcasts that don't require that at all. Like, for example, The Note Coach I've been on, or the Luke Page podcast, or there's others that slip my mind at the moment, where it's just like you're meeting for a coffee in real life and you get to know each other and you chat, and so you don't have that, I guess, advantage of necessarily bringing out some hidden piece of information that you wouldn't have known unless you read that book, but you still come out with a half hour or however long it is of gold, still, of really interesting stuff. And just from having a conversation, there's banter. I know if I'm talking to someone, whether I'm interviewing or being interviewed, that it brings out a different side to me, laughing and joking, and there's something to react to. So there's still value in having interviews without all that preparation. So sometimes I have tweaked my approach based on being on other people's podcasts. After being on Swapna's podcast, I want to give her a shout out. I'm trying to think the name of her podcast, the Brave Marketing Podcast. She had questions and I liked some of them. And one was something like, what's an unusual fact about you? And I found it there are a few questions that she asked that I really liked that I got ideas from and made them my own, but it helped me be able to ask icebreaker questions or, something a bit more interesting than, the usual, how did you start doing what you're doing now and all of those sort of things. It helps you to have background if you can't do that in-depth reading somebody's book and looking up their life story options. The other thing you may need to consider is what style of podcast is it in terms of genre. So I know some people that are talking about really heavy issues where it makes sense to make sure that you're on the same page and that there's topics that you can talk about or can't talk about, or that you're comfortable with how things go. So that might be something to take into account is, what your subject matter is. If it's not life and death, then you might not need it. But if it is very heavy subject matter, then it might be a good idea. But the other thing is basically time. So for myself, I work during school hours. The time seems to vanish super quickly. I have one day a week where I focus on doing my podcast recording, get in, get out, and get it all done as fast as I can. And if I'm booking an interview, if I'm booking a time with somebody, I'd rather get it all done in that one time and not halve my available time because I'm doing a pre-interview chat as well as a actual interview. And often sometimes when you get chatting on a pre-interview chat, you're having such a good conversation, you're thinking like, what a shame this isn't being recorded. So I would rather be as efficient as possible. That is coming from where I am at my life at this present moment. I also am doing short podcast episodes, so that approach suits me. Having said that, that doesn't mean that I'll do this approach forever. I have always been a fan of in-depth podcasts, and if I did, like I said, I'm doing short interviews, but more of them. But if I was doing a longer interview less often and had my kids in after school care or something like that and changed my available hours, who knows, I could explore that and change my approach. So it really depends on your goals. But yeah, I just wanted to cover some of the things that you might need to think about, but back yourself. And there's no right or wrong way. So yeah, when I talk about advice for podcasting, I think a lot of people talk about do it this way, do it that way. This is the one and only way to do it. And if you're after somebody like that, then I'm not the person for you, because there isn't one way to do it. There is your way to do it. But there's a few things to factor in, and then basically you can refine it. So you can do what works for you. And then if you find that that approach doesn't work, you can always change it. But there you go. That's a few things to think about. Yeah. So if you've got any questions, if there's any aspects I didn't cover, if that brings up any other questions for you, then please let me know. If you found that helpful, please like, review, rate, and all of those things. And I will send you all of the good vibes, and I'll see you in the next one. I'm stepping in the next level me. I'm here to be everything I can be. Like a snake, I'm shedding my skin to be my wild next level me. I'm stepping in the next level me. I'm here to be everything I can be. Give you whiplash when you turn around and see me go again. Next level me. It's time to be. Hello, it's Livy here. Have you ever wondered about what the key elements are that make a podcast truly stand out? Or maybe you're thinking about starting your own special podcast and feel a bit overwhelmed and don't know where to start. Well, I have something for you. Introducing the ultimate podcast checklist. Da, 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 da. It's a step-by-step guide that covers everything from the initial brainstorming to advanced growth strategies. It's the perfect companion for both new and seasoned podcasters. And the best part, it's absolutely free. Da, 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 da. To grab your copy, simply head to the show notes of this episode and you will find a direct link there, and then away you go. Remember, every podcast started with that initial spark and the right resource, so let the ultimate podcasting checklist be yours.